What you're about to discover will leave you speechless. Imagine a lynx mother adopting tiger cubs, a rare and heartwarming scene that moved the world. But what no one knew is that, years later, this story would take an unbelievable turn. Something happened to those grown tigers that no one could have predicted. And when you find out the ending, you'll understand why this bond defies everything we know about animal instincts. Watch until the end and get ready for a stunning plot. Twist! Oh, and make sure to subscribe, because the most amazing nature stories are right here. In the vast expanse of Wildridge Nature Reserve, nestled between the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, the ancient rhythms of wildlife continued their relentless cycle, sometimes merciless, sometimes miraculous. The end of a harsh season had arrived, marked by sparse rainfall and food scarcity. Among the bushes of an isolated clearing, a female lynx named by the local rangers as Shadow wandered alone. She had recently lost her litter to a silent infection, and her erratic, withdrawn behavior revealed that something within her had shattered. Nature, however, always prepares unlikely encounters. Ranger Emily Carson, with her weather-beaten face and determined green eyes, had been tracking Shadow for weeks. As the head wildlife biologist at Wildridge, Emily had developed a special connection with the lynx over the years, documenting her hunting patterns, her successful pregnancies, and now her devastating loss. "She's not eating properly," Emily noted to her assistant Marcus Wilson, a recent graduate with a passion for big cats. "Her movements are getting more unpredictable. I'm worried she might not make it through the next winter if she continues like this." Marcus adjusted his glasses and studied the satellite tracking data on his tablet. "Maybe she needs time. Animals grieve too, right?" Emily's response was interrupted by the urgent beeping of her radio. It was Ranger Tom Bradley, a veteran wildlife officer whose voice carried the gruff authority of someone who had spent more time with animals than people. "Carson, we've got a situation in Sector 7. I need you here ASAP." Within 30 minutes, Emily's jeep pulled up to the designated coordinates. Tom's tall figure stood silently over something small and vulnerable. As Emily approached, she could see 2 tiger cubs, no more than 2 weeks old, their eyes still closed, mewling weakly. "Found them about an hour ago," Tom explained, his weathered face grave. "Signs of a confrontation everywhere, blood trails, paw prints. Looks like Mama Tiger lost a fight with something bigger." "Mountain lion, maybe?" Emily suggested, kneeling to examine the cubs. "Probably. These little ones won't make it without intervention." Emily's mind raced through the options. The Wildridge Reserve had been part of a controversial tiger reintroduction program, bringing the endangered Bengal subspecies into protected American wilderness. These cubs represented a critical part of that conservation effort. "We don't have any lactating female tigers in the reserve right now," Marcus pointed out, having caught up with them. "And moving them to the Denver facility would be risky in their condition." Emily remained silent, an impossible idea forming in her mind. Tom noticed her expression and raised an eyebrow. "I know that look, Carson. What are you thinking?" "Shadow," she said simply. "The lynx." Tom's laugh was devoid of humor. "A lynx raising tiger cubs? That's insane." "She's lost her litter. She's still producing milk, and these cubs need a mother." "Different species entirely," Tom countered. "She'd more likely see them as a threat or prey." "Maybe," Emily conceded. "But I've read case studies of cross-species fostering. It's rare, but not unheard of." Marcus looked between the 2 senior rangers, hesitant to interject. "The alternative is almost certainly losing them." The decision wasn't made lightly. After heated radio calls with the reserve director, Dr. Alexandra Hayes, Emily received reluctant permission to attempt what everyone considered a foolhardy experiment. The next 12 hours were crucial, and Emily refused to leave anything to chance. Using Shadow's tracking data, they located her near a sheltered ravine. The plan was delicate. Place the cubs near enough for Shadow to detect their scent, but with the rangers hidden nearby, ready to intervene if she showed aggression. "This goes against every protocol we have," Tom muttered as they carefully positioned the cubs in a natural depression lined with soft grass. "Sometimes nature needs a gentle nudge," Emily replied, though the tremble in her hands betrayed her own uncertainty. From their hidden observation point, the three rangers watched through binoculars as Shadow emerged from the underbrush. The lynx paused, her tufted ears perked forward at the unfamiliar sounds. She approached cautiously, circling the cubs with deliberate steps. Emily held her breath. Tom's hand rested on his tranquilizer gun. Marcus whispered a prayer. Shadow sniffed at the cubs, her posture tense. Then, to the astonishment of the watching humans, she settled beside them, curling her body protectively around their small forms. When the larger of the cubs blindly nudged against her, searching for milk, she shifted position to accommodate it. "I don't believe what I'm seeing," Tom whispered. "We're not out of the woods yet," Emily cautioned, though hope bloomed in her chest. "We need to monitor this continuously." Over the next several days, a rotation of rangers maintained discreet surveillance. Shadow not only continued to nurse the cubs, but began grooming them as if they were her own. The impromptu family unit moved between 3 different den sites, with Shadow displaying all the protective behaviors of a natural mother. As weeks turned into months, the cubs thrived under Shadow's care. They opened their eyes to a world where a lynx represented security and nurturing. They learned to follow her silent movements, to recognize her signals for danger, to mimic her hunting techniques for small prey. Though genetically programmed to become powerful predators, they adopted the stealthy, methodical patterns of their adoptive mother. Dr. Hayes, initially skeptical, became fascinated by the arrangement. "What we're witnessing is unprecedented," she told Emily during one of her visits to the observation post. "They're developing hybrid behaviors, the stalking techniques of a lynx, but with their natural tiger strength. It's remarkable." Yet as the cubs grew, their physical differences from Shadow became increasingly apparent. The male, whom the rangers had named Kodiak, developed a robust frame that dwarfed his adoptive mother by his 10th month. His sister Sierra displayed unusual agility, combining the lynx's lightness with the raw power of her tiger genetics. "They're creating their own identity," Emily observed to Marcus as they watched the trio navigate a rocky outcropping, neither fully tiger nor lynx in behavior. The reserve staff continued to monitor the unusual family with growing concern. They knew that eventually natural instincts might override the emotional bond. The question that hung over the project was unavoidable. What would happen when the cubs reached maturity? The answer began to take shape during the cubs' 2nd year, when the Reserve Administration made a decision that would disrupt the fragile harmony of this unconventional family. To prevent inbreeding and enhance genetic diversity in the tiger population, a new group was introduced to Wildridge, a family unit led by a dominant male known for his territorial behavior. Bryant Sullivan, the reserve's new director, who had replaced the retiring Dr. Hayes, made the announcement at a staff meeting with the cool detachment of someone more concerned with scientific outcomes than emotional attachments. "The new tigers will be released in the northeastern sector next week," he informed the team. "They've completed quarantine and adaptation protocols." Emily raised her hand immediately. "That's dangerously close to Shadow's territory." "The reserve isn't a petting zoo, Dr. Carson," Sullivan replied, his tone dismissive. "Natural selection and territorial behavior are essential components of a healthy ecosystem." "These cubs," Emily began. "Are tigers," Sullivan interrupted, "and it's time they were integrated into their natural social structure." Emily exchanged worried glances with Marcus, now a full-fledged ranger himself. They both knew what Sullivan either didn't understand or chose to ignore. Kodiak and Sierra no longer behaved like typical tigers. Their movements, their hunting patterns, even their vocalizations had been shaped by Shadow's influence. What neither Emily nor anyone else on the staff could predict was just how dramatically these differences would matter when worlds collided. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge not only the bonds of this unusual family, but also human understanding of the complex interplay between nature and nurture. The introduction of the new tiger family to Wildridge Reserve created immediate ripples throughout the ecosystem. The dominant male, a magnificent specimen with distinctive markings that earned him the name Titan from the Rangers, wasted no time establishing his territory. His roars echoed across valleys, sending smaller predators into hiding and alerting every creature to his formidable presence. Emily Carson tracked these developments with growing unease. From her observation post, she documented how Titan methodically marked boundaries, intimidated potential rivals, and led his family group in coordinated hunts. His behavior was textbook, tiger dominance, exactly what Director Sullivan wanted for the reserve. His territory has expanded another 2 miles east, Emily reported during the weekly staff meeting. At this rate, he'll reach Shadow's clearing by the end of the month. Sullivan nodded with satisfaction. That's natural behavior. The reserve can support multiple tiger groups with proper territorial distribution. But Shadow and her cubs aren't a typical tiger group, Marcus interjected. They don't recognize standard tiger social cues or territorial markings. Sullivan's dismissive wave cut through the air like a knife. Then they'll learn, or they'll adapt by relocating. That's how wildlife management works, Wilson. After the meeting, Emily found Tom Bradley waiting by her truck, his face set in grim lines. Sullivan's a bureaucrat, not a field biologist, he said without preamble. He doesn't understand what we've got with Shadow's family. We need more time, Emily agreed. Kodiak and Sierra are caught between worlds. They hunt like lynx but have the strength of tigers. They don't know how to interact with their own species. Tom leaned against the truck. Maybe we should consider relocating them ourselves before there's a confrontation. Emily shook her head. Separating them from Shadow now could be traumatic, and where would we take them? No other reserve would understand their unique behaviors. The decision was temporarily taken out of their hands when heavy spring rains washed out the eastern access roads, delaying Sullivan's planned follow-up assessments of Titan's group. Emily seized this opportunity to increase monitoring of Shadow's family, hoping to prepare them somehow for the inevitable encounter. What she observed both fascinated and concerned her. As adolescents, Kodiak and Sierra had developed distinct personalities shaped by their unusual upbringing. Kodiak had become cautious and methodical, preferring to hunt from concealment rather than using the direct pursuit typical of his species. Sierra showed remarkable adaptability, sometimes employing lynx tactics for smaller prey while demonstrating natural tiger strength when circumstances required it. Most striking was their continued devotion to Shadow. Though they now dwarfed her in size, both cubs deferred to her leadership, followed her signals, and shared their larger kills with her. A behavior almost unheard of in wild tigers. It's like they've created their own culture, Emily explained. To Rachel Chen, a visiting ethologist who had heard about the unusual case. They're neither fully tiger nor lynx in behavior. Nature versus nurture playing out before our eyes, Rachel mused as they watched the trio through binoculars. But what happens when they meet others of their genetic kind who haven't shared their cultural experience? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. Despite the washed-out roads, Titan's territory expansion continued relentlessly. The inevitable collision of worlds occurred on a crisp autumn morning when Shadow led her cubs to a hunting ground near Aspen Creek. Traditionally, her favorite area, but now within Titan's claimed territory. The ranger monitoring station picked up the rapid movement of multiple large predators converging. Emily and Marcus raced to the location, but weather conditions slowed their progress. By the time they arrived, they could only witness the aftermath of the first encounter between the two tiger groups. From their vantage point, they saw Titan's family group, the male, 2 females, and 3 cubs, in aggressive postures at one end of a meadow. At the opposite edge stood Shadow, with Kodiak and Sierra flanking her protectively. The standoff was tense, with Titan occasionally roaring challenges that Kodiak and Sierra didn't respond to in expected ways. "They don't understand the social signals," Marcus whispered. "Look how they're positioning themselves. That's Lynx defensive formation, not tiger confrontation stance." Emily nodded tensely. To Titan, they probably seem like unnatural threats rather than potential Pride members. For several days, the two groups maintained an uneasy distance, with Titan's family clearly perceiving the unusual trio as intruders rather than potential allies. The breaking point came when Shadow, seemingly unaware of the new territorial boundaries, ventured into a prime hunting zone that Titan had claimed. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Titan's group launched a coordinated attack meant to drive away the perceived invaders. But instead of retreating or responding with typical tiger behavior, Kodiak and Sierra reacted with the defensive tactics Shadow had taught them, tactics entirely unsuited to confronting a full tiger group. By the time the reserve's intervention team arrived, Kodiak had sustained serious injuries while attempting to protect Shadow. The Lynx herself had disappeared into the dense forest, and Sierra had managed to drag her wounded brother to safety in a rocky outcropping inaccessible to the larger tigers. Emily's heart sank as she assessed the situation through high-powered binoculars. "Kodiak's hurt badly," she reported to Tom. "We need to tranquilize him and get him medical attention." "And Shadow?" Tom asked. Emily's voice wavered. "No sign of her. Sierra keeps looking toward the eastern ridge. She might have fled that way." The next 48 hours were a flurry of activity. With Sullivan's reluctant permission, the team tranquilized Kodiak and transported him to the reserve's medical facility. His wounds, while serious, weren't life-threatening. Sierra refused to leave her brother, pacing anxiously outside the medical building until Emily made the controversial decision to allow her limited access to him during his recovery. "This breaks every protocol we have," Sullivan complained during an emergency staff meeting. "Their bond is unlike anything we've documented," Emily countered. "Separating them completely could compromise Kodiak's recovery." "And Shadow?" Sullivan pressed. Emily's face fell. "Still missing. We've deployed tracking teams, but the transmitter signal is weak and erratic." Sullivan leaned back in his chair. "Perhaps this is a natural correction. The cubs, young adults now actually, will integrate with their own kind." The silence that followed was broken by Marcus. "With all due respect, sir, that's unlikely. They don't recognize other tigers as their own kind. They've imprinted on Shadow. Their behaviors, hunting patterns, even vocalizations are modeled after hers." "Then perhaps this experiment has run its course," Sullivan suggested coolly. "We've gathered valuable data, but now reality has reasserted itself." Emily fought to keep her professional composure. "The experiment, as you call it, has revealed extraordinary adaptability in both species. We can't just abandon them now." Sullivan's expression hardened. "Dr. Carson, your emotional involvement is clouding your scientific judgment. These are wild animals, not characters in a Disney movie." The meeting ended with a compromise. Kodiak would receive necessary medical treatment, and efforts to locate Shadow would continue for 2 more weeks. After that, resources would be reallocated to other projects. As winter approached, the future of the unusual family hung in balance. Kodiak recovered physically, but refused to eat properly without either Shadow or Sierra present. Sierra became increasingly agitated, alternating between staying near her brother and making solo excursions that the tracking team believed were searches for their missing adoptive mother. Emily spent countless hours observing them, noting how their behaviors were changing under stress. "They're at a crossroads," she confided to Marcus one evening, as they watched Sierra pacing restlessly near the medical facility. Too tiger to be accepted by other Lynx, too Lynx-like in behavior to integrate with Titan's group. "What if Shadow doesn't return?" Marcus asked the question that had been haunting them all. Emily watched Sierra pause to look toward the distant mountains, as if listening for a call only she could hear. "Then they'll have to find their own way, create their own place in a world that doesn't have a category for what they've become." Little did Emily know that far from being finished, the story of this extraordinary family was about to enter its most remarkable chapter. Forces were already in motion that would challenge everything the Wildridge staff thought they understood about wildlife behavior, adaptation, and the powerful bonds that can form across the boundaries nature had supposedly fixed. As the first snow began to fall on Wildridge Reserve, neither humans nor animals could predict how profoundly their lives would change in the seasons to come. The seeds of transformation had been planted. Now they would begin to grow in unexpected and potentially revolutionary ways. 3 years passed, bringing dramatic changes to Wildridge Reserve and all who called it home. The once tight bonds between Shadow's unusual family had been severed by circumstance, leading each member down distinctly different paths. Kodiak, after his recovery, retreated into the most remote regions of the reserve. The trauma of the confrontation and Shadow's disappearance had pushed him toward isolation. Rangers rarely spotted him, catching only occasional glimpses through remote cameras positioned in the northwestern highlands. When they did, they noted how he had grown into a formidable predator with unusual hunting patterns. Unlike typical tigers, he avoided open spaces, preferred ambush tactics, and maintained a territory 3 times smaller than average for a male of his size, but defended it with remarkable efficiency. "He's created his own rulebook," Emily observed. One morning, reviewing the latest footage with Marcus, "Look at how he moves. That's pure Lynx stealth combined with tiger power." "Has he had any contact with Titan's group?" Marcus asked, zooming in on footage of Kodiak silently navigating a rocky ledge with unexpected grace for his size. Emily shook her head. "None that we've documented. He actively avoids other tigers, even avoids the researchers. He's become the ghost of Wildridge." Sierra's journey had taken an entirely different direction. After weeks of searching fruitlessly for Shadow, she had eventually returned to the clearing where they had lived as a family. Rather than join other tigers or establish a traditional territory, she had done something remarkable that brought her to the center of the research team's attention. It began with an orphaned deer fawn, found injured after a mountain lion attack had taken its mother. The fawn had wandered into Sierra's territory, and the researchers had grimly expected nature to take its course. Instead, Sierra had approached the fawn, sniffed it thoroughly, and then, astonishingly, guided it to shelter. Over subsequent days, she protected it, even sharing kills until the young deer was strong enough to forage. As if this weren't extraordinary enough, Sierra later took in an orphaned fox kit, creating an unlikely collection of protected animals within her territory. She fed them, guarded them from predators, and even played with them in moments of surprising gentleness. Its maternal behavior transferred to other species. Dr. Elaine Winters, the behavioral specialist who had replaced Sullivan after his promotion to a desk job in Washington, explained to her fascinated staff, "She's replicating the care she received from Shadow. Emily nodded. She's living Shadow's legacy, creating her own mixed-species family. This unprecedented behavior attracted international attention. Researchers, documentary filmmakers, and conservation specialists began visiting Wildridge to witness what many were calling the Sierra phenomenon. Articles in prestigious journals discussed the implications for cross-species cooperation and the malleability of instinctive behaviors. On a crisp autumn morning, Emily was guiding a small group of visiting ethologists to an observation point overlooking Sierra's territory when her radio crackled. "Carson, come in." It was Jacob Martinez, one of the newer rangers assigned to perimeter monitoring. "Go ahead, Martinez. I've got something at the Eastern Ridge observation post you need to see. Camera 3 picked it up about 20 minutes ago." "On my way," Emily replied, curious but not particularly alarmed. After apologizing to the visitors, she handed them over to Marcus and drove to the designated location. Jacob was waiting with his tablet already cued to a specific video clip. "I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself," he said, pressing play. The footage showed a familiar shape moving cautiously along a game trail. A female lynx, older now, but unmistakable. "Shadow," Emily whispered, her heart pounding. "She's alive." The lynx paused on screen, sniffing the air, her movements still displaying the characteristic caution that Emily remembered. But there was something different about her posture, a wariness born of experience rather than innate caution. "Where was this recorded?" Jacob pointed toward the ridgeline. "About half a mile from Sierra's territory." She was moving in that direction. Emily felt a complex mix of emotions. Elation at seeing Shadow alive, concern about how her return might affect the delicate balance that had been established, and scientific curiosity about what this could mean for their understanding of long-term bonds in cross-species relationships. "Let's keep this quiet for now," she decided. "Just the core research team. I want to see what happens naturally before we have every wildlife photographer in Colorado descending on us." Over the next few weeks, Shadow's movements formed a pattern. She would approach the edges of Sierra's territory, observing from a distance as her adopted daughter cared for her unusual menagerie of orphans. She never approached directly, maintaining a cautious perimeter as if evaluating the situation carefully. "It's like she's conducting her own research," Dr. Winters remarked during a team briefing, assessing Sierra's behavior before deciding whether to re-establish contact. Emily agreed. The question is, does Sierra know she's there? Tigers have keen senses, but Shadow is incredibly stealthy. The answer came unexpectedly during a violent summer storm. A flash flood threatened the lower meadows where Sierra had established her den with the current group of orphans, 2 fox kits and a young raccoon displaced by logging operations beyond the reserve's boundaries. Rangers monitored anxiously as Sierra led her charges to higher ground, navigating treacherous conditions with remarkable adaptability. What none of them anticipated was Shadow's emergence from the tree line, deliberately positioning herself where Sierra would detect her. The moment of reunion was captured by the reserve's weather-resistant cameras. Sierra froze, the fox kits huddled against her massive form. Shadow remained motionless, ears forward, tail still, a posture of neither threat nor submission, but recognition. Sierra moved first, approaching with slow, deliberate steps. The two touched noses briefly, an intimate gesture of reconnection. Then, without further ceremony, Shadow turned and led the way to an alternative shelter in the higher elevations, a cave system that hadn't appeared on Sierra's regular patrol routes. She came back to help, Emily marveled, watching the footage later. She must have been observing long enough to know Sierra's patterns, her vulnerabilities. But why wait so long? Marcus wondered. 3 years is an eternity in wildlife terms. Dr. Winters had a theory. Recovery, perhaps. We don't know what injuries she sustained in that confrontation with Titan's group. Or maybe she needed time to evaluate whether rejoining her adopted cubs was viable. Whatever the reason, Shadow's return coincided with a new period of tension at Wildridge. Titan, now older but still the dominant predator in the reserve, had become increasingly aware of Sierra's growing influence. The unusual harmony she created, predators and prey coexisting in protected association, challenged the natural order he instinctively enforced. Researchers noticed Titan's group spending more time near the boundaries of Sierra's territory, making aggressive displays. The message was clear to those who understood tiger behavior. The anomaly would not be tolerated indefinitely. "We're heading for another confrontation," Emily warned during an emergency meeting with Dr. Winters and the senior staff. Titan perceives Sierra's territory as a threat to his authority. It violates everything in his genetic programming. "Can we relocate either group?" Dr. Winters asked. Tom Bradley, still serving as head ranger despite approaching retirement age, shook his head. Moving Sierra would endanger her orphans. They depend on her protection, and relocating Titan's group would create a power vacuum that could destabilize the entire predator hierarchy in the reserve. "What about Kodiak?" Marcus suggested. "Has he shown any awareness of Shadow's return?" Emily consulted her notes. "Our tracking data doesn't show any deviation in his patterns. He's maintaining his isolation in the highlands." "But if conflict erupts," Dr. Winters pressed. Emily met her gaze steadily. "Then we face a situation without precedent in wildlife management, and we'll have to decide whether to intervene or let nature take its course, whatever that might mean, when we're dealing with behaviors that challenge our definition of natural." As if responding to some invisible clock ticking down, tensions escalated with each passing week. Titan's patrols along Sierra's territory became more frequent, more demonstrative. Shadow remained with Sierra, the two forming a protective barrier around the orphaned animals in their care. Rangers increased monitoring, preparing tranquilizer equipment as a last resort, if intervention became necessary. The wildlife ecosystem of Wildridge held its collective breath, poised on the edge of transformation. What none of them realized was that another player in this drama was about to emerge from the shadows, literally. High in his isolated mountain territory, Kodiak stood motionless atop a rocky outcropping, his powerful body silhouetted against the setting sun. His keen senses had detected something changing in the wind currents, carrying familiar scents from the lower elevations. For 3 years, he had chosen solitude, healing both physically and emotionally from the trauma of separation. But now, something primal stirred within him, a memory, a bond formed in his earliest days that transcended conventional understanding. With deliberate purpose, he turned away from his solitary domain and began moving downward toward the valleys he had avoided for so long. The time for isolation had ended. Family, however unconventional, was calling, and deep within his complex hybrid nature, Kodiak was finally ready to answer. Emily Carson had never seen Wildridge Reserve so alive with tension. Even the smallest creatures seemed to sense the impending confrontation, falling unusually silent as they took cover in burrows and nests. The morning air hung heavy with expectation, as she and Marcus completed their routine check of the monitoring equipment surrounding Sierra's territory. 3 separate trigger events on the perimeter sensors last night, Marcus reported, scrolling through data on his tablet. Titan's group is pushing the boundaries. Emily nodded grimly. They're testing for weaknesses, classic predator behavior when preparing for territorial expansion. She adjusted her binoculars, scanning the tree line where Sierra and Shadow had last been spotted. "Any visual confirmation of our unlikely family?" "Last seen near the Eastern Creek, a bend. Shadow appears to be teaching Sierra's orphans some kind of stealth movement." Marcus couldn't hide the wonder in his voice. "It's like watching knowledge transfer across 3 different species." Their radio crackled with Tom Bradley's gruff voice. "Carson, Wilson, we've got movement on the northern ridge. Something big coming down from Kodiak's territory." Emily froze. For 3 years, Kodiak had remained in self-imposed isolation, a solitary figure rarely glimpsed even by the reserve's most dedicated trackers. His sudden movement toward the lowlands could not be coincidence. "He knows," she whispered, meeting Marcus's startled gaze. "Somehow, he knows Shadow is back." They redirected to the northern observation post, arriving just as the morning sun crested the mountains. Through high-powered spotting scopes they could see him, larger and more powerful than when they'd last treated his wounds, moving with deliberate purpose down a game trail that would lead directly to Sierra's territory. "Look at his movement. Pattern," Marcus observed. "That's not random exploration. He's heading straight for them." Emily studied Kodiak's purposeful stride. "We need to alert Dr. Winters. If all 3 of them reunite just as Titan is pushing for confrontation, we could have a perfect storm," Tom finished her thought, lowering his own binoculars. "Or something else entirely. We're in uncharted territory here." By midday, the research team had assembled in the observation center, watching multiple feeds from cameras strategically placed throughout the reserve. Dr. Winters stood before the main display, her normally composed demeanor showing cracks of concern. "Titan's group has moved another quarter-mile into contested territory," she reported, "and Kodiak will reach Sierra's clearing within the hour if he maintains his current pace." "Should we intervene?" asked Jacob Martinez. "Tranquilizers, maybe?" Dr. Winters hesitated. "Ordinarily, I'd say yes. But what we're witnessing here defies ordinary wildlife management protocols. These animals have demonstrated behaviors beyond our predictive models. They've transcended their programming," Emily added softly. "If we interfere now, we might never understand what they're capable of." The decision was made to observe but prepare for emergency intervention. Teams with tranquilizer equipment were positioned strategically, ready to move if the situation deteriorated into life-threatening conflict. As predicted, Kodiak arrived at the periphery of Sierra's territory as afternoon shadows lengthened across the valley. His approach was neither stealthy nor aggressive. He moved with the confident patience of one returning home after a long journey. Sierra detected him first. The cameras captured her head lifting, nostrils flaring as she caught his scent. The orphaned animals under her care sensed her alertness and huddled closer. Shadow, who had been resting nearby, rose to her feet with ears forward, her posture communicating neither fear nor aggression, only recognition. "Look at that," whispered Marcus. "They remember each other." The reunion unfolded with breathtaking simplicity. Kodiak entered the clearing slowly, his massive form dwarfing both Sierra and Shadow. There was no dramatic display, no vocalization, just Sierra moving forward to touch her nose briefly to her brother's face, followed by Shadow, approaching to stand before her adopted son. For a long moment, Kodiak simply looked down at the Lynx, who had raised him, then lowered his head to press his forehead gently against hers. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Winters murmured, eyes wide. "This challenges everything we think we know about species recognition and family bonding." The atmosphere in the observation center was electric, with wonder and scientific excitement. But the moment of peace was shattered by an alert blaring from the southern monitoring station. "Titan's group on the move," Jacob reported, fingers flying across his keyboard to bring up the relevant feeds. "Fast approach, aggressive posture. They've caught Kodiak's scent, and they're converging on Sierra's territory." The monitoring screens showed Titan leading his family group in a direct line toward the clearing where the reunited trio stood. His movements communicated clear intent. This was not a reconnaissance mission, but a decisive move to eliminate what he perceived as a territorial challenge. "Time to intervene," Dr. Winters decided, reaching for the radio. All teams, prepare. For tranquilizer protocol. Emily's hand shot out, stopping her. Wait, look at Kodiak. On screen, a remarkable transformation was occurring. The formerly reclusive tiger had positioned himself at the edge of the clearing, facing the direction of Titan's approach. His posture had changed, becoming both protective and assertive. Sierra moved to flank him on one side, while Shadow retreated slightly to guide the orphaned animals to safety. They're coordinating, Marcus breathed, acting as a unit. Dr. Winters hesitated, her hand still on the radio. Hold intervention teams in position, but stand by. Let's see what happens here. The confrontation, when it came, was both more and less dramatic than anyone anticipated. Titan burst into the clearing with a thunderous roar, his family group fanning out behind him in textbook tiger attack formation. He charged forward several paces before stopping abruptly, clearly taken aback by what he found. Instead of retreat or chaotic defense, he faced Kodiak standing perfectly still, making no sound, exhibiting none of the expected counter-displays. Sierra remained equally motionless beside her brother. This was not the response encoded in Titan's genetic understanding of territorial challenge. The standoff stretched for what seemed an eternity. Titan paced, roared, swatted at the ground, all the classic dominance displays of his species. When these elicited no conventional response, his agitation visibly increased. He's confused, Emily observed. His instinctive playbook isn't working. What happened next stunned even the most experienced researchers. Kodiak finally moved, taking a single step forward. But instead of roaring or charging, he simply sat down, his massive form settling calmly onto the forest floor. Sierra, following his lead, did the same. The message was unmistakable in its quiet power. We will not fight. We will not flee. We are simply here. Titan's agitation reached a peak. He charged forward several steps, then stopped again, clearly destabilized by the lack of expected response. His family group, sensing his uncertainty, began to display confused behaviors, advancing, retreating, looking to their leader for cues that were no longer clear. This is extraordinary, Dr. Winters whispered. Kodiak is countering aggression with, what would you call this? Peace, Emily said simply. He's offering a third option beyond fight or flight. For several tense minutes, the confrontation balanced on a knife's edge. Titan made several more aggressive displays, each met with the same implacable calm from Kodiak and Sierra. Shadow remained in the background, her presence a reminder of the unconventional upbringing that had shaped her adopted cubs into something new and unexpected. Finally, in a moment that would be analyzed in wildlife behavioral studies for years to come, Titan took a step backward, then another. His roars subsided to warning growls, then to silence. With a final, almost confused glance at the unlikely trio, he turned and led his family group away from the clearing, back toward their established territory. The observation center erupted in astonished exclamations. "Did we just witness what I think we witnessed?" Marcus asked, incredulous. Emily nodded slowly, her scientific mind racing to process the implications. Kodiak just established a new kind of dominance, not through violence or intimidation, but through the refusal to accept those as the only options. "It's a complete paradigm shift," Dr. Winters agreed, her voice hushed with wonder. "They've created their own social structure, their own rules." As the adrenaline of the moment subsided, Emily found herself reflecting on the journey that had led to this point. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save orphaned cubs had evolved into something that challenged fundamental assumptions about wildlife behavior, adaptation, and even the boundaries between species. In the clearing below, now bathed in the golden light of sunset, Shadow moved to stand between her grown tiger cubs. Despite the vast differences in size and species, their movements demonstrated an unmistakable harmony. A family bonded not by genetics or instinct, but by shared experience and choice. "What happens now?" Jacob asked, giving voice to the question on everyone's mind. Dr. Winters considered this thoughtfully. "Now we observe, we document, we learn. These animals have something to teach us, if we're humble enough to listen." Emily's gaze remained fixed on the unlikely family in the clearing. "I think what we're seeing is just the beginning," she said softly. "They've broken one boundary. Who knows what other impossibilities they might challenge next?" As darkness fell over Wildridge Reserve, the humans withdrew to their observation posts and research stations, leaving Shadow, Kodiak, and Sierra to their reunion. Three individuals who had defied nature's conventions to forge a connection that transcended species. In their quiet presence together, surrounded by the orphaned animals Sierra had taken under her protection, a new chapter was unfolding, not just for them, but for human understanding of what was possible when love and adaptation overcome the limitations of instinct. The moon rose over the mountains, casting silver light across the clearing where an unprecedented family rested peacefully together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new observations, new discoveries. But tonight belonged to them, the lynx who had dared to mother tigers, and the tigers who had learned to see beyond the boundaries of their genetic heritage, to embrace a different way of being in the world. 5 years after the historic confrontation between Kodiak and Titan, Wildridge Reserve had transformed from a standard conservation area into an internationally recognized center for interspecies behavioral research. The clearing where Shadow had first nursed the orphaned tiger cubs, now known officially as Harmony Meadow, had become the heart of something revolutionary. Emily Carson, recently promoted to Director of Research following Dr. Winters' retirement, stood on the observation deck overlooking the expanded territory that Shadow's family now peacefully occupied. Beside her, Marcus Wilson adjusted the settings on a sophisticated camera designed to capture nocturnal activities without disturbing the animals. "The National Geographic team arrives tomorrow," Emily reminded him, tucking a strand of silver-streaked hair behind her ear. "They're doing a special feature on the 10-year anniversary of the experiment," Marcus chuckled. "Some experiment. We broke every rule in the Wildlife Management Handbook." "And rewrote the handbook in the process," Emily replied with quiet pride. 6 universities now offer courses based on the Wildridge model of adaptive conservation. Below them, the meadow teemed with activity as the afternoon sun bathed the landscape in golden light. Shadow, now in her elder years but still remarkably spry, was demonstrating hunting techniques to a group of young foxes. The lynx moved with deliberate grace, her tufted ears forward in concentration as she showed the kits how to stalk through tall grass without creating movement above. Sierra, massive yet gentle, supervised from a nearby rock outcropping. Over the years, she had continued her remarkable practice of fostering orphaned animals, creating what researchers now referred to as a multi-species sanctuary within her territory. Currently, her unusual family included foxes, a young bobcat, 2 raccoons, and even a fawn that had been abandoned during a difficult birth. The Cambridge team published their analysis of Sierra's vocalizations last month, Marcus noted, checking readings on his tablet. They've documented 17 distinct sounds she uses exclusively with her adopted offspring, sounds that don't appear in any recorded tiger communication patterns. Emily nodded. She's invented her own language too. Bridge the gap between species. "Nature finds a way," Marcus murmured, unconsciously echoing a phrase that had become something of a mantra among the Wildridge staff. The most dramatic transformation, however, had been in Kodiak. After the confrontation with Titan, he had gradually abandoned his solitary existence, establishing himself as a protective presence on the periphery of Sierra's territory. Rather than challenging Titan for dominance or attempting to establish a traditional tiger territory, he had created something entirely new. A buffer zone that separated the conventional predator hierarchies from the sanctuary his sister maintained. Most remarkably, over time, Titan's attitude toward the unconventional family had shifted from hostility to cautious tolerance, and eventually to what could only be described as respect. The two male tigers now maintained an unusual détente, occasionally even hunting in loosely coordinated patterns that maximized efficiency while minimizing confrontation. Dr. Patel's team documented another joint hunt last week, Emily commented, checking her notes. Kodiak herded the elk northward, and Titan's group made the actual takedown. They fed separately but peacefully, with both groups getting adequate nutrition. Cooperative hunting between unrelated tiger groups. Marcus shook his head in wonder. Another impossible behavior to add to the list. The implications extended far beyond Wildridge. Conservation projects worldwide had begun implementing what they called adaptive integration approaches, deliberately fostering bonds between orphaned animals of different species when appropriate. Success rates varied, but the principles pioneered. At Wildridge had saved hundreds of animals that might otherwise have perished. The research community had initially been skeptical, even dismissive. Emily still remembered the scathing criticism in academic journals when the first papers about Shadow's family were published, anthropomorphization masquerading as science, one prominent zoologist had written. Anecdotal observations without statistical validity, another had claimed. But as the years passed and the evidence mounted, skepticism gradually gave way to curiosity, then to cautious acceptance, and finally to enthusiasm. What had begun as an act of desperation, placing tiger cubs with a grieving lynx, had evolved into a new framework for understanding animal behavior and cognition. To think Sullivan wanted to shut the whole thing down, Marcus recalled with a wry smile. Emily laughed. He sends me an email every year when our research funding gets renewed, never admits he was wrong, but always congratulates us on continuing to challenge conventional wisdom. Their conversation was interrupted by a movement at the edge of the meadow. Kodiak had emerged from the tree line, his powerful form now bearing the dignified signs of middle age. He moved with purpose toward where Shadow was instructing the fox-kits, his path direct, but his demeanor relaxed. The younger animals scattered at his approach, but not in terror. Their movement suggested a respectful awareness of his presence rather than fear. Shadow turned to acknowledge him, her small form almost comically dwarfed by his massive bulk. Yet there was no doubt about the bond between them as they greeted each other with the gentle head touch that had become their ritual. Still hard to believe sometimes, Marcus said softly. A lynx and tigers creating their own family rules. Emily's expression grew thoughtful. We humans like our neat categories. Predator and prey, wild and tame, family and stranger. Shadow and her cubs remind us that life exists in the spaces between our definitions. From the southern ridge, a familiar figure approached the meadow. Ranger Tom Bradley, now officially retired, but still a regular presence at Wildridge. His weathered face broke into a smile as he joined Emily and Marcus at the railing. "Thought I'd find you two here," he said by way of greeting. "Can't miss the evening gathering." The evening gathering, as the staff had come to call it, was perhaps the most extraordinary testament to Shadow's legacy. As sunset approached, the various orphans Sierra had fostered over the years would gradually converge on the meadow. Some were now adults with territories of their own, yet they returned regularly to the clearing where they had been raised, a behavior that defied conventional understanding of territorial imperatives. "PBS wants to do a live special next spring," Emily told Tom. "They're calling it Shadow's Children, the meadow where predators make peace." Tom snorted. Dramatic title, but not inaccurate, Marcus pointed out. As they watched, Sierra descended from her rocky perch to join Shadow and Kodiak in the center of the meadow. The three formed a tight circle, moving with the synchronized awareness of family members who could anticipate each other's actions without signals visible to human observers. "You know what amazes me most?" Emily said after a moment of contemplative silence. "Not just that they overcame their instincts, but that they taught others to do the same. They created culture and passed it down." Indeed, the influence of Shadow's unorthodox parenting had spread beyond her immediate family. Several of Sierra's orphans, upon reaching maturity, had exhibited similar nurturing behaviors toward vulnerable animals they encountered. A fox raised in Sierra's care had been documented protecting an injured squirrel rather than hunting it. A bobcat fostered in the meadow had later been observed sharing territory peacefully with species that would typically be considered competitors. "They're rewriting the rules of the entire ecosystem," Marcus agreed, "not through force, but through example." Tom leaned on the railing, his eyes fixed on the peaceful scene below. "Remember what you said when we first found those tiger cubs?" he asked Emily. "About nature sometimes needing a gentle nudge." Emily smiled at the memory. "I had no idea where that nudge would lead us." The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across Harmony Meadow. As if responding to some invisible signal, animals began emerging from the surrounding forest. The extended family that Shadow, Sierra, and Kodiak had created through their unconventional bonds. Foxes trotted confidently into the open space. The bobcat kits bounded playfully after them. The young deer moved with graceful caution to join the gathering. Most remarkably, from the northern edge, two adolescent tigers approached, offspring from Titan's group, who had been born and raised after the historic confrontation. They had never known the rigid territorial hostility of their parents' generation. Instead, they had grown up observing the peaceful coexistence that Kodiak had established, and they had learned. "They're the future," Emily said softly, "the ones who will carry this forward." As darkness settled over Wildridge Reserve, the humans withdrew from their observation post, leaving the meadow to the extraordinary family gathering below. They had documented, analyzed, and published extensive research on what happened in that clearing. Yet Emily knew that science alone couldn't capture the full significance of what Shadow had created. Some things had to be witnessed, experienced, felt. The lynx who mothered tigers, the tigers who protected deer, the predators who chose cooperation over confrontation. These weren't just anomalies to be studied. They were living proof that the boundaries we believed fixed could be transcended through connection and care. In her office later that evening, Emily prepared notes for the upcoming documentary interviews. On her desk sat a framed photograph taken the day they had first placed the orphaned tiger cubs near Shadow, a moment of desperate hope that had blossomed into something beyond anyone's expectations. Outside her window, the stars emerged one by one over Wildridge Reserve. Somewhere in the darkness, Shadow and her unlikely family rested together, their very existence a testament to possibilities yet to be discovered. What had begun as a tragedy, orphaned cubs, a grieving mother, had transformed into something that would influence conservation efforts for generations to come. Emily closed her notebook and looked out at the starlit landscape. The story of Shadow's family wasn't just about animals, it was about seeing beyond limitations, about connection transcending boundaries, about love finding expression in unexpected places. It was about the gentle nudges that could sometimes change everything. In Harmony Meadow, beneath the same stars, Shadow curled protectively around the newest members of her extended family, not because instinct dictated it, but because she had chosen a different path. Beside her, Kodiak and Sierra maintained their vigilant presence, guardians of a legacy that had begun with an act of desperation and grown into a revolution. And as the night deepened over Wildridge Reserve, the Impossible family slept peacefully, together, dreaming whatever dreams come to those who have created something entirely new in the world. Those who have shown us all that the heart's capacity for connection knows no boundaries of species, circumstance, or inherited nature. In their quiet presence together, they embodied the simple, profound truth that had transformed Wildridge from a standard reserve into a place of pilgrimage for scientists and conservationists worldwide. That sometimes, when we dare to imagine beyond the boundaries we've been given, we discover that the impossible was merely waiting for someone brave enough to try. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Shadow, Kodiak and Sierra at Wildridge Reserve has touched your heart. This extraordinary tale of unexpected family bonds reminds us that connection can transcend all boundaries. For more emotionally captivating stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. If this journey moved you, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring unique stories that explore life's complexity and wonder. What unlikely connections have you witnessed in your own life? We're eager to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Until our next adventure together.